Welcome to the Language Alchemy Podcast, where we explore how our language and communication patterns directly impact our lives and relationships, and where you get transformative communication tools to bring forth more authenticity and compassion to all your relationships. Thank you for joining me today. This is your host, Alejandra Siroka, a communication teacher and coach who is devoted to helping multicultural individuals, change makers, and couples engaged in personal growth experience the life and relationships they long for through the power of transformative communication. Whether this is your first time or you have been listening to the Language Alchemy podcast for some time, I'm grateful you're here today. This is a Q&A episode, one of my favorite ways to connect with you and address the real-world challenges you are facing in your relationships. And when you stay until the end, you will find out how you can also send me a question you would like me to address in the podcast. Today's question comes from Sekani, one of our beloved Language Alchemy students. This question is also going to be useful to you because it touches on something every single one of us experiences, which is what happens when our partner's emotionality triggers our own reactive ways. Whether you are in a multicultural relationship, navigating different emotional expression styles, or you're a change agent, trying to stay grounded while supporting others through difficult times, or you're simply someone who loves deeply and sometimes gets overwhelmed by your partner's pain, this episode is for you. But first, let me read Sekani's question in full, and then we will explore some transformative tools together. He wrote, when someone is having big, quote unquote, negative emotions, I have a few tools in my toolkit that I rely on. One of them is acknowledging what's happened and then reflecting back what I'm hearing, sensing, or noticing. I may say something like, that seems to have really upset you. Another tool in my toolkit is to extend compassion to the other person. So I may say something like, that sounds painful. Still, another tool is identifying with the other person. So for example, I say something like, I think burnt water is the worst too. All of them work pretty well in letting people know I have their back. People are generally receptive to these communication tools I learned. And I even follow up with asking if there's anything I can do or if there's anything they need from me. So my question for you, Alejandra, is, do you have any meditations, any mantras, any sayings that can help me remember those tools when the heightened emotions are resonating within me? Let me give you some context. Recently, my girlfriend was upset and anxious about politics. Then I got anxious too, and I wanted to do something. She didn't want that, and we ended up devolving into a fight. With a couple days space, I can see that at the core, I just want us to support each other through life's challenges and uncertainties. Maybe that will be my mantra. What do you think? Here's my answer. First of all, though, I want to say how rewarding it feels to know that Language Alchemy students like you are so aware that the way they communicate shapes relationships. In this question, Sekani, you're also beautifully demonstrating the work of a language alchemist. Because in your question, you are wondering about how you are showing up in your relationship through your communication, rather than complaining about how others are showing up in the relationship because of their communication. You are becoming such a wonderful language alchemist, Sekani. And if you need further proof, I want to acknowledge your awareness about having communication tools in your toolkit that you can choose from rather than reacting in habitual ways. You've identified 3 powerful tools that work well for you. One is empathic reflection, That is to say, being in the same wavelength as the other person and acknowledging their experiences and feelings without imposing on the other person and saying something like, "You're really upset," but rather using empathetic language and saying something like, "That seems to have upset you." This is a major distinction. You also have another tool, compassionate acknowledgement. That is to say, expressing out loud that the other person is going through a painful experience and saying something like, "That sounds painful." And then you talked about a third tool you have, which is about validating the other person's experience or feelings by sharing relatable incidents, feelings, and experiences that you've also had. The fact that you are aware of all these tools and you're using them consistently shows that you're already integrating conscious communication and language alchemy in your life. Your insight about wanting to support each other through life's challenges is beautiful and could absolutely serve as a grounding mantra. But now let's explore this deeper, because what you're describing here, getting triggered by your partner's emotions and wanting to quote unquote do something, is one of the most common relationship challenges I see. Let's look at your experience. It may be that in this situation, you had some emotional entanglement when your girlfriend shared her feelings. Emotional entanglement happens when someone we love is in distress. Our nervous system often mirrors theirs. This happens because we are wired for connection. Our mirror neurons fire when we see others in pain. And suddenly, we are feeling their flavor of pain as if it were our own. In your case, it's very likely that you took in your girlfriend's political anxiety and you let that become your anxiety, which then triggered your action-oriented response. To check this out, my question to you is, what do you tend to do when you feel anxious? Is your habit to try to fix things right away? If your answer is yes, then now you know that you got emotionally entangled. And by the way, this is completely human. The challenge is learning to stay grounded in your own emotional center while still being present for your partner, especially when your partner is sharing feelings you don't like to feel or that are uncomfortable for you. Now, before we go into specific mantras and tools, let's talk about the most crucial moment in these types of interactions: the pause between feeling triggered and then reacting. This is where transformation happens. When you notice yourself getting activated by your partner's emotions, that's your cue to pause and acknowledge your trigger. This requires practice, but in time, it only takes a couple of seconds. It's important you acknowledge your trigger to yourself, not necessarily out loud, especially if your partner is in distress or they're still expressing their emotions. All you need to do is actually very simple. Say to yourself, "I got triggered," and then take a wholesome breath. There's one more thing we need to talk about here before we go into tools. And that is that at this moment in time, Sekani, many people are dysregulated. Many people are anxious, upset, and overwhelmed. There are so many things happening in our communities and the world at large that are eliciting a lot of feelings and emotionality. As conscious and mature individuals, we need to be prepared to lovingly, compassionately, and skillfully hold space for others to share their sadness, their pain, their overwhelm, their anger, their anxiety, or whatever big feeling they may be having. And of course, The key here is to do it without emotional entanglement. Oftentimes, when people are going through these big feelings, they need our presence more than our suggestions or solutions. They need our witnessing more than our fixing. And they need our connection more than our actions. Why? Because when they share something with us, they are doing it so that they don't feel alone in their experience. So all we need to do is accompany them in their experience without making that experience our own. And I know it may sound simple, and yes, it is. And it's not easy. It's hard, but it's not impossible. So how do you do that? Well, I will tell you 5 things you can do that include the mantras you requested. Number 1, check your intention as your partner is speaking. Sekani, the most authentic mantra will come from your specific intention. For example, you could say to yourself in that moment, I'm getting triggered. My intention is to set my trigger aside and listen to you. That's a beautiful mantra. Another time, you could say to yourself, I'm noticing I'm getting triggered. My intention is to notice what's happening in my body and relax that part of my body. Your mantra could be about your intention with the other person, like you shared in your example. However, I would like to invite you to change the word role for the word intention. And instead of saying, my role is to support, not to solve, to say, my intention is to support you. And instead of saying not to solve, I suggest you say, to let go of my habit of solving or giving suggestions. Why am I asking you to shift your language? Because intention comes from within. It is an inner invitation to stretch yourself and tap into your motivation and capacity. But the word role implies that there's an external expectation, something that you should be able to do according to somebody else. And it can feel very limiting. So sometimes a part of you may want to rebel against this external imposition. So my suggestion to you is to use the word intention instead of using the word role. And secondly, I suggest changing the language not to solve into let go of my habits of solving. I'm offering this because when you express it this way, it is affirmative in your mind rather than the negative not to solve. And when the brain receives negative language, it has to translate that into something affirmative that it can do. In this case, the affirmative to let go of my habit of solving calls you into accountability with yourself in a very clear and specific way, to let it go. It also offers you a reminder that your partner often needs your steady presence more than your action plans. Number 2, remember this triggering experience is temporary. Yes, it will not last forever. I rarely make promises because I take language very seriously. In this case, though, I can promise you that the triggering experience with your partner's emotionality will shift into something else, especially if you're able to stay present with them and with your intentions. Some mantras or anchoring phrases you could say to yourself when you find yourself in the midst of the discomfort of the trigger are, your feelings are valuable and so is my calmness. This reminds you that you can validate their experience without taking on their emotional state. Another one is a simple, I am here with you. A third one is, You are sharing your feelings with me because you feel safe with me. And I'll give you a fourth one. This experience is a cloud in the vast sky. It will go by. Number 3, notice the breath. You can notice how your partner is breathing, and at first you can explore breathing with them at their rhythm without becoming them. This will place you in the space of empathy. Then you can start lengthening your exhale. This will bring you calmness and groundedness. And it will help you disentangle or avoid getting entangled with their emotional state. And there's another mantra that comes to mind as you're breathing and noticing their breath. You could say to yourself, your storm is not my storm. I am a lighthouse. This beautiful metaphor reminds you to stay steady while the other person is going through various emotions. Number 4, enter into the space of equanimity. After you have calmed your nervous system down, after you have individuated from them or disentangled from their emotionality, you can remember that sometimes you also go through storms. An anchoring phrase here would be to say to yourself, sometimes I also feel angry. Sometimes I get dysregulated. Sometimes I feel emotional or anxious or whatever big feeling is there. In this way, you are normalizing your partner's experience as a human experience. Number 5, when you feel like you want to say something out loud, only say what you are experiencing, meaning only talk about your trigger if your partner really has space for it and has the capacity to listen to you. I often talk about the importance of noticing your partner's body language. If your partner is still showing signs of distress, if they're biting their nails, if their breathing is shallow, if their voice doesn't sound resonant and balanced, if they're not making eye contact with you, if their arms are crossed, if they have big gestures, then your partner doesn't have space to hear about your experience at this very moment. They're still going through their own experience. So there's no room to put something else in. And if you say something about your experience, then it will likely escalate into a fight or an argument, which, by the way, is what you shared you experienced. So instead of doing that, remember the value of patience and micro conversations. Only address what's going on with you at a later time when your partner is regulated and capacitated enough to have space for your feelings or your experience. And now I have a bonus tool for our multicultural relationships. It's important to recognize that emotional expression varies significantly across cultures. What seems like big emotions to one person might be normal expression in another culture. Some cultures encourage emotional restraint, while others support more expressive communication. So if you are getting triggered in a multicultural relationship, having conversations about emotional expression styles when you are calm and you are not getting triggered can prevent lots of misunderstandings during heated moments and situations. Something you can talk about with your partner in a multicultural relationship is how you each handled big feelings when you were young, how your families taught you to handle big feelings. You can ask questions like, what helps you feel supported when you're upset? And what helped you feel supported when you were young? Now, again, have these conversations before big feelings occur and not in the midst of them. Finally, Sekani, your specific example about politics touches on something many couples are struggling with right now. Political anxiety can be particularly triggering because it often involves feelings of powerlessness about large-scale issues that we can't directly control. So when your partner is upset about politics, they're often processing fear about the future, or grief about the state of the world, or anger about injustice. And rushing to do something or fix it can inadvertently communicate that their feelings are problems to be solved rather than valid responses to genuine concerns. What I suggest then is to validate their feelings and say something like, "It makes complete sense that you're feeling anxious about this. These are scary times." Sometimes, depending on how our partners are and our capacity to listen, we can ask them a question. What would feel most supportive right now? Would you like to tell me more about this? Would you like me to hold your hand? Can I give you a hug? Is there anything else that can support you right now? However, only ask this question about what would feel supportive when your partner has gotten the big feeling out and they made some kind of pause. Because if they are in the middle of expressing a big feeling, they may tell you, "I don't know what I need." So if you're going to offer support, wait for a pause. Now, before we go into our recap, what if any of these tools don't work? Well, sometimes, despite our best intentions and our best choice of tools, conversations don't devolve into fights. This is a possibility. But this doesn't mean that you have failed. No, it just means you are human. The key is to know what to do afterwards. Sekani, I love that you took the time to gain some perspective and you identified your core motivation, wanting to support each other through life's challenges. This kind of reflection can lead to repair, which is exactly what healthy relationships require. And by the way, I recorded an episode on how to have repairing conversations. That's episode 137, titled "Saying Sorry is Not Enough, How to Have a Repair Conversation." I will add the link to that episode in the show notes. And now let's recap what you've heard in this episode and also find out how you can ask me a question for me to address in the podcast. Today, we talked about what to do when our partner's emotional triggers stimulates our own emotional reaction. I answered the question from one of our language alchemy students, Sekani, and we talked about emotional entanglement and how to disentangle ourselves by using 4 tools. Checking your intention as you listen to your partner. Secondly, remembering feelings are temporary and the experience will not last forever. Thirdly, noticing breath patterns. And number 4, entering a space of equanimity. Then I gave you a bonus tool, which is to avoid talking about your reaction until your partner is regulated again. I also reminded you of being aware of your partner's culture, and I invited you to listen to episode 137 if none of these tools work and you get into a fight with your partner. If you also have questions that you would like me to address in the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. And how do you do that? Visit languagealchemy.com/podcast question and submit your question there. Your question might help thousands of other people who are facing similar challenges. And don't worry about whether your question is good enough or whether others will relate. Trust me, if you are experiencing it, many others are too. Your questions Help us create a language alchemy community where we all grow together. So if you have a question, don't wait. Go to languagealchemy.com/podcast question and enter your question there. I will add the link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening. And a special thanks to Sekani for such a thoughtful question and a generous gesture. Until next episode, and as we say in Argentina, ciao ciao. Original music by Gary LaPoe. You can find all links in the show notes at languagealchemy.com.